Have you ever wondered what's in a police background packet? Today I'm going to go over it for you. Let's discuss. Hey, before we get started, I have two gifts in the description for you. One is the Getting Started workshop. It's going to walk you through every phase of the hiring process. Plus, there's some hidden bonuses in there I know you're going to like. Next is a coaching call with any member of my team or even myself if you'd like, where you can jump on a call, discuss your hiring process, go over your background packet like we're going to do today, and just give you the best chance and any advice we can on succeeding in your hiring journey. Now, let's jump over to this. I have what's pulled up here is a old sample instructor PHS. So it's one of the packets that we would send for our instructors that we would hire to go through. Now, we mirror our hiring process over here for our instructors almost identical to a police hiring process, right? Now, when I show you this packet, just know that the actual PHS or your background packet for a law enforcement department is going to be 5 times the length of this. So this is roughly about, I'd say 9 to 11 pages, I believe. We'll go through and figure out that together. But a typical one and our sample one that we provide for our actual candidates applying to become law enforcement officers so that they can fill it out and do it correctly, that one's 60 plus pages. So this one's an abbreviated version, but I want to show you, and we don't have time to go through 60 plus pages, but I want to show you what you can expect to see inside of a police background packet if you haven't seen one before. Now, I'm going to share my screen. If you are just listening to this and are not on the video side, that's fine. Don't worry. I'm going to walk you through verbally everything that we're doing. So here we go. Hopefully you can see my screen now. And what we have going on is you have instructions for completing it. As we said, this is for instructors. This is an old sample one that we would use. And then you have your directions and your sections that you're most likely going to complete. So the sections are going to have multiple different aspects. So right here we have law enforcement applicant history, we have criminal history, we have substance abuse, law enforcement experience, and then additional information. This is super abbreviated, as I stated before, compared to what you're going to experience, but it's going to give you a good idea of what to expect. So first thing before you fill out any police officer, PHS, or background packet, you want to read all the directions and make sure you understand them. If you don't understand them, make sure you run them through somebody that can help facilitate. Jump on one of the coaching calls and run it through one of the instructors. They can't help you with an actual live PHS that you're filling out for a department. That's why we have a sample one, but they will give you guidance and help you understand the directions and what exactly it is it's asking for. And make no mistake, I just got off the phone. Was it this week? It was either this week or last week with an individual who admitted to being arrested, who's never actually been arrested. Individuals who admitted to or failed to disclose other law enforcement contacts because they were dismissed. It's not that they're performing it inaccurate. It's the fact that they just don't understand what is actually legally required. So there's a checklist that we have here, and then right here, failure to complete, notarize, return the packet within specific time frame may result in disqualification from consideration for the position. You're going to see that almost on every single document you have to do for law enforcement. We're going to jump right in. Here you get the applicant's full information, their name, date of birth, address. All this needs to be accurate. Say you're applying to a job in, let's say Texas, right? We'll just say you're applying to a job in Texas, and one of the criteria to work in Texas as a law enforcement officer is to be a Texas resident. Well, if you put down here that, your address is 123 Main Street, wherever, Massachusetts, and zip code, that means you're an out-of-state applicant. That doesn't mean you can't apply to Texas. It just means you're going to have to update and move to Texas when you get hired, of course, right? That's common. Well, say that on your driver's license, it still has, let's say you live in Massachusetts right now, but you still have a New Hampshire driver's license and you're applying to Texas. That's going to be something that messes you up because you're going to put your address and everything here, and then they're going to ask you for a copy of your driver's license to confirm your address, and it's not going to match. And I've seen candidates get removed from the hiring process just for that because right then and there, if it's been typically more than 30 or 60 days since you've moved, you're supposed to update your driver's license. And that technically is a civil or criminal infraction, depending on your state. So, all right, here, I wouldn't worry about this too much. This section would probably be a little bit farther down in your law enforcement section, but what this is, and this you will see it, is all the departments you have ever applied to, right? So this is for them, it's the department that they worked for, right? And then application outcome, right? Non-select, disqualified, selected, withdrawn. Those are pretty much your four only outcomes for getting or for applying to a department, right? Non-select, which means you made it through the process, but at some point in time, they decided to move forward with other applicants and not pick you. Other times you were disqualified, you made it to a certain part of the process and they said, hey, based on something in your background, you don't meet our eligibility. That's a disqualification. Selected obviously means you got hired, and withdrawn means you quit or you withdrew yourself prior to completing the hiring process. Here's all the typical phases you will see, right? Your application phase, your written exam, your fitness test, your oral board, polygraph, background investigation, psychological evaluation, medical evaluation, and then your job offer. Once again, this is going to be repeated as necessary for however many departments you've ever applied to. So you'll see that, right? And then you'll always see this for any additional information where they provide additional sheets that you'll have to complete either at the end of that section or at the final end of your background packet or your PHS, your personal history statement. So then we get to criminal history, and they will ask vaguely, right? And you need to understand the terms here. So this says, have you ever been convicted? Oh, that's not what I want. Stand by. There we go. Let's unmark that so I can hopefully highlight this. I don't think I can, but it's all right. So this one says right here, have you ever been convicted of a crime, right? And if you've never been actually convicted of a crime, then at that point in time, I would say you would not mark yes to that. In fact, if you've been, say you've been arrested and it's been dismissed, that's not what this question is asking. It says, have you ever been convicted of a crime? Now, if you pled guilty to a moving violation, right? Is that conviction of a crime? Well, it depends on your state. Is a moving violation considered a crime? Is it considered a civil infraction? To what level moving violation? Would it meet the level of misdemeanor? And that's usually where you would determine whether or not you have been convicted of a crime is had you been or if being convicted without any, reductions from prosecutors or any plea deals, would it meet the level of, say, a misdemeanor? And then at that point in time, the answer, obviously, if you're convicted of a felony, you should probably know that. But yeah, at that point, say if you're doing 100 miles an hour down the road and you get pulled over, well, yeah, that's speeding, and speeding usually is a civil infraction depending on your state. But ultimately, it could also be looked at as, hey, this is reckless driving, which is a misdemeanor, which carries up to 6 months in jail. That would be a crime. And if you plead guilty to reckless or careless driving or whichever one they decide, then you would mark yes here. And then you would just say, hey, yes. And then you would just say, hey, this is what it is. This was the crime. This was the date. This was the location. And the outcome was whatever it would be. So same thing. So any of these are really major crimes. So assault, battery, most people will think those are exactly the same. It's not necessarily the case. Domestic violence, DUI, DWI, drug possession. Don't get cute here, right? So don't get cute with the DUI, DWI. If that's a lot of times it's written as just, once again, this is for instructors so they know to be pretty specific here. But if it says DUI or DWI and your state uses a different abbreviation or different code for it, like ARI, like alcohol related incident or whatever, don't try to get cute and mark no here, because when they find it, they're going to DQ you for omission, and you're going to try and argue, well, it wasn't. No, don't get cute. If you know that you actually have something that falls within this, just mark it and articulate it. Drug possession. Once again, convicted of this. It's not asking, have you ever possessed drugs? It's saying, have you ever been convicted of this crime? So keep that in mind. Drug trafficking. If you have ever been convicted or involved in this, that one's probably an immediate disqualifier. So just know that. Theft, burglary, two different things. Robbery, another thing. Once again, some states might link all these together. Fraud, embezzlement, a sexual offense, or other, right? This is the catch-all that most people will just bypass, and this is why they will get themselves disqualified, because here it's any other crime. And then once again, repeat this for however many crimes you've ever been convicted of, right? So then we go down to, now this isn't just conviction. This is, have you ever used? So have you ever used any illegal substance? Any illegal substance, right? So you would mark yes or no, depending on where you are. Then you would list each substance. And here's typically what you need to know for a background investigation. This is the easiest way I can teach you to articulate it. What was the substance? How many times used? Last time used? Those are really the only pertinent facts that are relevant, right? If they want to know more, they will ask more. But those are the facts that you need to know when you're filling out your background packet. All right. So once again, you'd repeat that for all your substances, add additional information on another page if you need to. Now, this goes into law enforcement experience. You will see this on some background packets because sometimes they're laterals and their new entries just share the same packet. So this will usually be a typical section. And because this is for our instructors, they have to have law enforcement experience. So that's why this one's on here. But excuse me, imagine this being just your employment record, right? So take out law enforcement experience and just experience. Imagine this is, are you currently employed? Take out the law enforcement agent. You should say yes, and you list who you're employed with and everything like that in your current employment. Have you ever been reprimanded by an employer? If yes or no, and then you provide the incident, date, and outcome, right? Yes, the incident was me joking around. The date was this time, and I was given a verbal reprimand. Have you ever been investigated for misconduct, right? Now, this is a very broad question because some people may have never been reprimanded at their place of employment. Once again, take out law enforcement agency and just replace this with employer, right? Have you ever been investigated for misconduct? This would be any employer. And then once again, you would list the incident, list the date, list the outcome. And it's critical that you do not bypass this because if they find out, you will be disqualified, and they're really good at finding out. All right, next. Have you ever been involved in any other conduct that could negatively impact your role as a takeout instructor and put police officer? So a lot of times, law enforcement are looking for crimes of moral turpitude, right? Which means just theft, theft, assault, burglary, all the crimes that really show a poor lapse of judgment, like to show a bad reflection of character. Now, just because you've had those crimes in the past, does that mean you're automatically DQ'd? No, if you have significant time and distance from them, if you stole something as a kid and now you're 25, or you stole something when you were 18 and now you're 40, chances are, as long as you've lived a very good life since then, it's not a major factor, right? And I'm not saying there has to be that much time. I typically like the rule of 7, but a lot of times departments have rules of 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, depending on what the circumstances is. I like the rule of 7. I usually can articulate anything 7 years ago. But for the most part, what you're looking at is the fact that you really want to be able to get all this on your document ahead of time, because if you try to add it in later after you've submitted, they may not accept it and they may think that you've been trying to deceive them and you were just afraid you were going to get caught. So keep that in mind. Okay. Next, additional information. This is asking for any reasons you ever were non-selected, disqualified, or withdraw from a police department. This will also ask you any other questions or any other reasons for anything, reprimands, there's just a multitude of these sections. So this is something that most people don't even understand. Gaps in employment. Please explain any gaps in your employment history. One of the major criteria is being able to maintain employment. Most people think that they're like, hey, I'm unemployed. This is a great time for me to become a law enforcement officer. That's not exactly true. Matter of fact, that is something that may hurt you in your hiring process because they want to see that you can maintain employment. The last thing they want to do is spend, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And some studies have been done in certain states that say it's roughly about $210,000 to get an officer from the application phase all the way up to off FTO, which means they're actually able to go out there, patrol on their own and do the job. The amount of time and training, all the money spent on getting them through the hiring process, it's about $210,000. So if it looks like that you're bouncing from job to job every year, that's not going to look too good because they want to see that you can maintain employment and then they're at least going to get their refund out of you, so to say. They're going to get the work out of you that they at least need to pay for all the hiring and training that's required. So what I would tell you is if you have an employer and you don't like them, don't just walk off the job for the love of everything. Don't do that. Um, and don't make waves at the job. Just be the humble professional, keep your head down, do what your employer tells you to do, unless it's, something unsafe or illegal or dangerous. And and then just kind of maintain your employment if you can. I understand there's a lot of reasons people can't, but if you can, it will look better the longer you have a maintained employment history. They're going to ask for references. Now, this is just three professional references, but they're going to ask for references for every place you've ever lived, every place you've ever worked, personal references, professional references. Those are different. Um, and then they might even ask for family, your family's contact information and references to check with them. Oh, and neighbor references, right? So keep that in mind. All right, next is your signature, right? So this is where you're swearing that everything above is true and accurate, and a lot of departments will even have a notary section if it's not digitized, so that you actually can't even sign this unless it's in front of a notary that puts their seal on it, so that they can 100% confirm that everything that you just did is accurate. And the reason for that is because down the line, if they find out that you lied about something, they will go to that. They will show you that you swore and affirmed to it, and that's under, you know, penalty of criminal action potentially. But yeah, I've seen it recently where someone lied to get hired, and then, 10, 15 years into their career, they get fired and they lose their pension because they had lied during their initial hiring process. So, and that's happening a lot more, right? Especially now with this big push to keep law enforcement ethics at the top, which it should be. So I'm not against it. Matter of fact, so don't lie. You don't need to lie. You just need to articulate. There's a lot more that goes into a police background packet. I mean, a lot more. I went over the kind of the meat and potatoes. So don't think that just the questions that I showed you are the questions that's going to be asked. They're going to ask you a lot more about substance use. They're going to ask you a lot more about criminal history. They're going to ask you about undetected crimes. So things that you have done that could have been a crime had you gotten caught. So keep that in mind. Whatever you do, this is just a kind of quick synopsis sample to show you what they're looking at. If you go into the police hiring process unprepared, and then they throw this sample or they should throw a PHS at you, a personal history statement or a background packet, and they tell you have 10 days to get it done, and you haven't prepared, you're probably not going to get it done in time. And if you do, it's probably not going to be done to the level it needs to for you to make it through the background phase. One of the first things I have our coaching members do that come in and wind up getting some guidance from us in our coaching programs is start their sample PHS so that we can go through it, make sure that they're actually understanding the legal terminology. They can set it and have it for their entire career. I highly encourage you, if you're going through the police hiring process and you haven't started working on a PHS yet, on a sample one for you to keep for yourself to use for all your hiring departments, start working on it now. Because if you get to the background phase and you're not ready for it and you submit a poorly crafted PHS, you're not going to make it through the hiring process. I hope this helps. Listen, we have those two gifts in the description, the Getting Started Workshop, plus all the hidden bonuses in there with that. as well as a coaching call with any member of my team or even myself if you'd like. Stay safe, and I will see you next time.